Our first keynote is making the business case for conservation practices. Pretty neat. It's delivered by somebody from corn. Nice synergy here. The Director of Water Quality Research for both Illinois Corn Growers Association and the Illinois Corn Marketing Board since 2014, and adjunct faculty at the U of I. In 2015, Laura established a farmer service program called PCM, Precision Conservation Management, helping farmers to adopt conservation practices in a way that minimizes financial and management risks to the farm, and also establishes and oversees 160 acres and a field laboratory to monitor nutrient losses from tile drain corn and soybean fields using various agronomic management practices. Please help me welcome Dr. Laura Gentry.
Good morning, Illinois Soybean Summit. It's so great to be here in person, and it's a real honor to be invited to provide one of the keynote addresses, and I'm also super excited to hear about Illinois soybean yields, how we can manage and maintain and grow our yields for soybean from Mr. Chris Ehler. So that'll be another great keynote following this one. And so I'm jumping straight into my message today, largely because I know how it goes in these meetings, because, you know, in a couple of minutes, people are going to start getting urgent text messages that they need to address, apparently. So when I see you looking down at your phone, I don't have to worry if you heard the main points that I was hoping to make today. And so here it is. We in agriculture, we have a long road ahead of us on our conservation journey. In fact, there is no end in sight. I'll give you a second to think about that, because I know some of you are thinking, crap, haven't we been talking about this for a couple of years now? Who thought that? Come on. Yes, that's true. We have been talking about this for quite a few years now. I think I need to mute this, don't I? So, we have miles to go before we sleep. And there is no reason to think that we are going to attain our sustainability goals anytime for quite a while. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that sustainability is so multifaceted. There's so many pieces of it, and it affects so many different parts of our society, so many different parts of our environment that are changing right now. And everybody sees different pieces of it that they need to address, and it all trickles down to you. There's so many different pieces of sustainability. Are we talking about clean water, healthy soils, climate change? What is it? What's the disaster du jour that you are going to be asked to address next? Here's another thing that I predict. I don't think that we will ever come to one exclusive, accepted definition of sustainability. Again, there's too many pieces to it. That's what I believe. And yet, I feel really confident that every farmer in Illinois is just going to continue every year, year after year, to be asked to demonstrate your sustainability to a greater and greater degree with higher and higher resolution data. How do you feel about that? I should give you a second to think about that, because some of you are thinking, well, that's messed up. I'm being asked to display my sustainability more and more, and nobody can even give me one definition of sustainability. How do you feel about that? Maybe we find ourselves at a point where we make a decision. Option A could be that we just continue to bow to the current definition of whomever is standing in front of us of what sustainability is, listen to them tell us what we have to do, and then we scramble in the background for a couple of months to see if we can match up to their requirements. That's sort of where we are right now, I believe. But option B might be that we come together big A agriculture, all of us come together and we decide for ourselves what our definitions plural, of sustainability are, what our goals, plural, are. We communicate those in a confident, reasoned voice using science to defend what we're saying. And then we go back to our farms and we manage our fields on our own terms, in our own time, and then we claim our own victories. What do you think of that? All of this, though, requires working together. And I would argue we have never needed to work together. Not as commodity association versus commodity association. Not as conservation program versus conservation program. Not as Illinois versus Iowa or Indiana or the Midwest versus the coasts. We need to work together as big A agriculture to address what's being required of us, what we should do, the right thing to do for the work that we do in agriculture. That's my opening thoughts. And why? Because we have a different kind of consumer today. I think that we are working up to the point that we can call the conservation age. That is what this age, this generation is looking to be. Welcome to it. The conservation age has arrived, and you are here. And these are the young people who are going to be steering our ship for the next 20 to 30 years. These are the ultimate consumers of our products. These are the people who are starting families right now across America. They're entering the workforce. God, we wish they'd enter the workforce, right? They're starting their careers. They're going to be driving our economy for the next 20 to 30 years. And they are going to be defining the United States' position in the world order with their decisions. And their decisions are based on their perceptions and their values. And they care about climate change. They have children that they wonder what their future is going to look like. Are their children going to have all the same opportunities that they have had? And how is climate change going to factor into their children's opportunities in the future? It's hard to begrudge anybody that. And so, there we have it. The millennials and Gen Z. And these are the folks that are going to be making decisions that are going to be affecting us for the next 2 generations at least. They're different from us. They're quite different. We'll be talking a bit about that here I'm going to come back to that at the end, about some of just the key factors that differ between these folks and the way I grew up and the way many of you grew up, in terms of the ways that they talk. Just their language is, obviously, it's different. It's always different in every generation. But no, the backing behind the way they talk and the education behind what they're saying is different. They want transparency. So this is something that is going to factor into how we are going to be asked to provide more and more information around sustainability. And again, why we need to, all of us, come together to address these big A agriculture conservation decisions. And why we really, really, really need to stop pitting ourselves against one another, one crop against another crop. So I have a question for you today. Which of these crops is really causing the nitrate loss problem in Illinois? If someone asked you, who's the main offender here in terms of nitrate loss in Illinois? Who is it? Is it wheat? Come on. For so many reasons, it's not wheat. Not to mention there's just not enough acreage in Illinois. No, it's not wheat. Soybean? Is it you? Certainly not. I don't even apply nitrogen to my soybeans. So it's not soybean. Okay. So it's corn then, right? Am I right? Corn's the problem? Is that what we've all agreed on? I would say that there is a strong body of evidence that I can use to confront and refute the idea that corn is the bad guy. And yet we have this perception, I would say, misconception in this room and well beyond, that when it comes to water quality problems in Illinois, corn owns the nitrate problem. There is a lot of evidence that I'm going to show to you right now to refute that and confront it, and I am interested to hear what you think about it. And I was told by one of our Illinois corn grower directors, who was a longtime Illinois soybean director, that you might throw things at me for this. And I'm just going to I don't dodge anything well. You'll probably hit me. And so I would ask you to just hold it till the end, would you? So here is my first piece of evidence in the case of corn versus popular perception in water quality. This is an article that comes from the Des Moines Register, dated April of 2015. April of 2015, so this is not long after the Des Moines Water Works lawsuit was being popularized in media. The fall of 2014 was when they began initiating that lawsuit against the farmers of the Upper Raccoon River in Iowa. Based on, it was effectively against the farmers of the river. It was officially against, of course, the drainage districts, but it was all around high levels of nitrate. And the Des Moines Water Works says, you're losing too much nitrates from your fields, and we've got to clean it up, and you need to pay for that. So the Des Moines Register goes to the land grant to Iowa State University. They find some very well-respected researchers there, Matt Helmers, Michael Castellano, and say, tell us what's happening here with agricultural fields and how they're losing so much nitrate out of these fields. How can they fix it? Let's start here at the arrow where it says, this is Michael Castellano. He says, studies show about the same amount of nitrogen is lost from our fields whether farmers grow corn or soybean, which requires no nitrogen application. Oh, I forget I have a clicker here. In fact, there's no statistical difference, he said. He goes on to say, problems occur, though, when there are no plants in the fields to soak up the nitrates, particularly in the spring and the fall. And then he makes a bold recommendation: cover crops. So that's something you can file under no statistical difference in nitrate losses from cornfields versus soybean fields in Iowa. This is my second article I have as evidence to show to you today. This has nothing to do with water quality. This is a paper out of Purdue, another well-known research team led by Tony Vinn. It was published in Nature Scientific Reports. This is just talking about changes in nutrient use among our most recent corn hybrids over the past 70 years. Vinn says, over the last 70 years, genetic improvements have led to an 89% increase in grain yields and a 73% increase in nitrogen use efficiency from the earlier hybrids that we used. Further, there's been a plateauing of nitrogen fertilizer application rates to corn in the U.S. since the 1980s. But we're capturing more of the fertilizer we apply, so less is lost. So we can file this under corn is producing more grain with the same amount of nitrogen that we were applying 40 years ago. That's interesting. Now we step right back into Illinois here, but we step way back 25 years. 25 years ago was about the time that we're starting to get some serious side-eye from some of the universities like Tulane down around the Gulf of Mexico, and they're wondering why the Gulf hypoxic zone is getting bigger, and they're starting to look at agricultural fields upstream in the Mississippi. And at that time, there was a researcher, Dr. Mark David, who was in the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences at the University of Illinois in Champaign. He had been studying a couple of central Illinois rivers, looking at different nutrient concentrations for 6, 7, 8 years at that time. And he was interviewed by a journalist from the Chicago Tribune, September 1997. He says, well, we determined that 98% of the nitrate in the river came from the farm fields of the area, mostly from tile-drained fields. And that's Mark David. Well, Mark David had a young, at the time, agriculture researcher, technician, field guy that worked with him named Lowell Gentry. Lowell was at that interview as well. Lowell was a farm kid from Illinois. And he stepped in and he added a piece there. He says, well, I was surprised to learn that up to half of the nitrate load in the stream may be coming from mineralization of soil. And that indicates that nitrate pollution is not totally a problem of unused nitrogen fertilizer. This was 25 years ago. This was my husband, Lowell Gentry, saying this. So 25 years ago, we have known that not all of the nitrogen in our rivers, or even the excessive nitrogen in our rivers, is solely coming from nitrogen fertilizer misuse. Now this is my last piece of information I want to share with you, and I think it's the smoking gun personally, but it takes a little bit of a backstory for you to really appreciate this one, I think. All right, so this is taking place, this is an article from 2016, May of 2016, and this is coming from a team of researchers from the University of Iowa, not Iowa State, University of Iowa, not the land grant. And one particular researcher, Chris Jones. Does anybody know Chris Jones? Yes. So if you were to go and YouTube Chris Jones, you would find that he is a researcher, University of Iowa, and has been saying for quite some time that we have water quality problems. They're becoming worse in Iowa. We should just accept that they're going to continue to become worse until we regulate agriculture, because farmers aren't going to be able to address the scope and scale of the nitrate problems we're seeing in Iowa voluntarily. You can go and see that he has been saying this for like 10 years. Other researchers on this was Keith Schilling, and there were some research collaborations with Iowa Soybean Association as well for this research. This paper should have gotten a lot more visibility in 2016, given everything that was happening around the Des Moines Waterworks lawsuit, than it actually did. But this team of researchers, and Chris Jones in particular, believed that corn was the problem. That was where he started with his hypothesis, because it was, he believed, a mismanagement of nitrogen problem. I believe. I hope I'm not misstating anything here. This is based on what I have seen from his interviews. And he saw the opportunity to test this hypothesis in a really conclusive way when the renewable fuel standard was passed, and when we started developing more ethanol, and more ethanol plants were being produced or built in Iowa, and more of the fields, more of the landscape was going into corn production than in soybean production. It was the perfect situation for him to test this hypothesis. And so he started gathering all this information, he and these other researchers. They were able to get over 7,000 water samples collected between the dates of 1999 and 2014 from the Raccoon River watershed, the same watershed that is being sued for increased nitrate levels. He also was able to get fertilizer records for 700 fields. So this is a very conclusive study that he had here. So I'm going to begin reading right here at the highlight. As more acres were planted in corn, and fewer, therefore, in soybean, fertilizer application increased a whopping 24% in the watershed. Interestingly, nitrate river nitrate did not increase and may have even decreased slightly at most watershed locations. That's fascinating, isn't it? Where did the additional fertilizer nitrogen go? Jones says that clues can be found in the difference between corn and soybean plant growth, soil chemistry, and the decay of stalks and other crop residues. Nitrate nitrogen can accumulate and be immobilized in the soil under corn. On the other hand, dead and decomposing soybean plants can increase the amount of nitrate in the soil vulnerable to loss, more so than corn stalks, especially if accompanied by fall tillage. The defense rests, Your Honor. I have now presented to you 4 separate papers by 4 individual research teams. They are saying there's no difference in Iowa in nitrate losses from cornfields and soybean fields. They're saying we have only continued to do better and better with our nitrogen application and management over the past 70 years for corn production because of improved breeding primarily. They've said that we've known for 25 years that half the nitrogen coming through out of our tie lines could be coming from from mineralized soil nitrogen. And finally, this paper that shows when we have more corn being grown in a watershed, we're actually seeing lower nitrate losses out of the tile lines or out of the rivers. So I guess I really am at a point where I just have to ask a question, my friends. I don't know. It just almost seems like we should be asking, why aren't we seeing better water quality results in Illinois? Let me think about this. I don't know. Could it be soybeans? Isn't that special? That was my only impersonation this morning. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now a word from our sponsor. We must stop pitting one crop against the other. We are not serving ourselves. Collectively, we're not serving ourselves. When we think about the issues that are at hand here, we need to be thinking about the problems that are causing the issues, understanding those problems, and then determining what we can do about it. And when it comes to our nitrate loss problems and our phosphorus loss problems, we need to be thinking about residues and these processes involved in breaking them down. So here we have it, decomposition. First and foremost, and a lot of this is going to be review for some of you. I understand that, and I'm sorry. I can't help myself. Decomposition, though, is a biologically mediated process. That means microorganisms in the soil are the ones that are doing it. That's what it means. So if the microbes are the ones that are decomposing our crop residues, why are they eating up all of our crop residues? Or is it like a public service that they provide for us so that we have clean fields to plant crops? No, they're eating our crop residues for the same reason that you're enjoying your breakfast bagel or you're going to have lunch this afternoon or pizza tonight. It's because we are carbon-based organisms and they are carbon-based organisms. They're doing it to satisfy their carbon requirement, and they are doing it so that, okay, we're multicellular, most of them are single cellular, there's a little difference there, but they're doing it so that they can continue to grow and maintain, and critically, so that they can reproduce. That's why they're out there chewing down on all of our crop residues. It's to obtain the carbon that's there, but they have to balance it out, just as we have to balance it out, balanced diet and all of that. And nitrogen is the key piece that determines the decomposition rate other than the carbon piece. Obviously, there's carbon. And essentially, they have to maintain this carbon to nitrogen ratio in their bodies, just as we have to. And that magic number is about 24:1. So for every 24 carbon atoms that they go out there and feast on in the residue buffet you provide for them every fall, for every 24, 25, 26 carbon atoms, they have to take in 1 nitrogen atom. And what happens when they can't get that 1 nitrogen atom? Where do they turn to? They start looking for it out there in the soil. They'll get it from your fertilizer. They'll get it from the soil organic matter. They'll get it from each other if they have to kill each other, because let's face it, it's a brutal place out there. So, this idea of decomposition, it really is a battle between our crop plants and the microbes. It's a bit of a balancing act, but in the battle between who gets the nitrogen out of our crop residues, it's really not a fair fight. It never was. The microbes always outcompete the crop plants. They always take their piece right off the top. They're just better at it. And the plants get the sloppy seconds. But, and this is a piece we're going to return back to, because it's really the only way that we can manage crop residues in any of our agricultural fields, corn or soybean, but we can manage the microbe activity to an extent because they are controlled by their physical and chemical environment. So, I also can't help myself. Once in a while, I just have to throw up a boring nitrogen transformation slide. And this is circa 2005 right here. Yeah, do you know how you can tell it's circa 2005? It's the blue background. Anytime you see this blue background, you can be like, oh God, that was from the early 2000s. And that's right. And if it has yellow writing on it, how many of y'all have seen it? Everybody loves their blue backgrounds with the yellow writing on it. Some of y'all still use that. I know you do. And so I took this one from an agricultural researcher, actually a soil chemist named Bruce Seelig gave this to me when I taught my very first soil management class at North Dakota State University. So here we're seeing an organic nitrogen molecule. That means that the nitrogen is bound up by carbon atoms. It's not out there free, and it's not available for plant uptake. It's bound up in these carbon atoms here, that molecule is. And it's organic. That means that it is now, or it was once alive. That's what that means. And so it's all bound up in the carbon, and it's going to have to take a little bit of the initial stages of decomposition, which means the bacteria start chewing on this. Let's imagine this is that's this original one up here. Do I have a, there we go. Let's imagine this is some of our crop residues. So our bacteria start chewing down on it, and then they, if you'll forgive me, they poop out some ammonium. So we have some ammonium here, and we call that, we call that process ammonification, the first step. Well, the ammonium then gets converted on over to nitrite, which is not good in the soil, bad actually, and it gets quickly converted over to nitrate by other specialized bacteria, and that process is nitrification. And if you take this whole process right here, starting with organic nitrogen, following through to nitrate, we can use this one single term, mineralization, for that, just so we're all on the same page. That's what that really means. And then if we just take it all the way full circle from nitrate, and then it gets gobbled up by an organism, it could be a weed, but it's usually a microbe, because let's face it, they're better at getting the nitrate. Then we call that process from here to here, that's our immobilization step, because again, it's no longer available for crop uptake. And isn't that clean and simple? Well, it looks clean and simple, doesn't it? It looks clean and simple until you realize that this nice, neat little process is happening amidst all these other possible nitrogen transformations. And they're all being controlled by the soil chemistry, by the soil mineralogy, by how much water is available, by the temperature, by the crop residues. Everything is controlling all these different. The fate of nitrogen in our soil is incredibly complicated, and that's why it's really kind of a difficult thing for us to manage. So anybody who says that it's super simple, I'm afraid they either don't know everything or they think you don't know everything. Because here's that one really simple little process that we were starting with. So we're tempted, I know we're tempted to think that this is just a pretty simple process, and it looks kind of like this. You know, there's this battle going on in the soil between the microbes and our hapless corn plant out here, and of course the corn plant's losing. And we think it looks like this, but in reality it looks a lot more like this. There's a battle happening in every corner of the rhizosphere, and it's microbe fighting microbe for limited resources, and it's microbe fighting plant, and it's plant fighting plant, and it's really a rough place to live. It's really, I guess, the take-home message from all that. So, back to our slides here. Everything that we just said, decomposition is biologically mediated. It's the soil microorganisms that are doing it. They have to maintain a carbon to nitrogen ratio. One more critical piece, soil microbes are controlled by other soil factors, including the quality, the quantity, and the condition of the soil residues that we provide. Also, oxygen levels, temperature, and moisture. How can we use that? How can we use that to help us to reduce our nitrate losses from our soybean fields? There's really two good options. There's a few more out there, but there's two good, reliable options right now. Reducing our tillage and growing a cover crop. Let's just talk about how it is. What is it about tillage that is enhancing decomposition of our residues? Again, many of you know this. Tillage sizes up residue. It's just that simple. It just cuts it down into smaller physical chunks that the microbes can get to, more surface area. And then tillage makes the microbes much more active. This is the step that happens in our fields when we till and we see flushes of nitrate being released weeks before we have any crop plant out there to take it up. Which goes back to the second point, grow a cover crop. Tillage makes the microbes more active. They're adding oxygen into the soil, critically important, drying the soil out and warming it up. And all of this is just acting like giving every one of your microbes a little Red Bull. So let's think for a minute about some of this tillage information. And I'd like now to bring in some information about a program that I work closely with called Precision Conservation Management. What is PCM? Precision Conservation Management is a farmer service program. The Illinois corn growers started this program in 2015. It was in response to the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy because the world agreed that the corn growers owned the nitrate problem in Illinois. And so we were just like, okay, we better do something about that. So we went to a lot of different farmers, talked about what we needed, and the same answer came back. We need financial information about what these conservation practices are costing us on our farms. And there wasn't a lot out there. And so PCM is a farmer service organization, and our goal is to work one-on-one individually with farmers in the program to help them to better understand the costs and the benefits of adopting conservation practices from an environmental perspective as well as from a farm financial business perspective. So we want to understand how conservation practices impact farm net returns. We want to address, of course, water quality, and in the game, we want to stop further agricultural regulation. We believe we can address the nitrate problems in the Midwest. We think that we can do it on our own terms. We can do it more effectively and more efficiently and with a lot better attitude if we do it voluntarily. And in recent years, we think that we also have a role to play in making sure that farmers are getting the fairest shake possible in some of these new carbon and ecosystem service markets. We have seen again and again how as these new markets are being built up and developed, people are swooping in and trying to get right in the middle of all of that. We want to be sure that the farmers, the people like you who are taking the risk, who are doing the extra work and paying the extra money to develop these assets are at least accruing the bulk of the benefit that you are creating. So I have to say that we have a couple of our specialists here this morning. We have a table out here in the back. You can, of course, go and check us out. And we also have a new director, Mr. Greg Goodwin, has just joined us a couple of days ago, in fact, as the director of the Precision Conservation Management Program. We're so pleased to have him too. So super excited about the future of PCM. We'll tell you that we are in 31 states across the state of 31 counties across the state of Illinois, and we did that largely through partnership with the Illinois Soybean Association just this year. We doubled in size in 2021 because we partnered with you. So, with Illinois Soybean Association, and we're very, of course, appreciative of everything that the soybean folks are bringing to this new organization. But moving into tillage and our data, what we did here is this is just the simplest way for us to demonstrate all the different tillage practices for corn and soybean in our 6-year data set. We now have 7 years. We're working on our 7th year right now. You can see that by far the most soybean fields in the program here, 42% of them, are no-till in Illinois in the areas where we farm or where we serve in the PCM program, our 8,000 and some fields. We also are split fairly evenly here with corn between 1-pass and 2-pass tillage. You can see though that for soybeans, 24% of the farmers are using 2-pass tillage to produce their soybeans. And we would love to see that move to 45 to more over here in the no-till side if our farmers can do it profitably, because we know that it has a lot of wonderful sustainability outcomes. Sometimes what we like to do in the PCM program is to look at our most profitable fields. So we just take all of our soybean fields. This is just showing, by the way, for high productivity fields, high productivity soils. We take all of the fields for all the years in our program, we just rank them from most profitable down to least profitable, and we just take the top 25% and we say, what were these strategies on these fields? And here we're looking at our tillage strategy of our top 25% most profitable soybean fields for this 6-year period. 42% of these fields were no-till. 42% of them, and that's by far the largest percentage. The next largest amount, 23%, was 2-pass. So it's really following very much the trend of the whole PCM tillage pool of farmers. 23% of them are using 2-pass medium tillage. I put here the net revenues that we calculated in PCM for each one of these. Same net profitability. When you look at the most profitable, it's this set of farmers right here, 2-pass light, it appears to be that they made about $465 per acre. They were only representing about 7% of the most profitable fields, but they did make higher net returns. When I dug down into that a little bit more, this is where averages will trick you. They actually had the same yield, 74 bushels per acre, as this much larger data set of no-till farmers, the same average yield. It's just that we have a much larger spread because we have so many more farmers in the no-till side. So farmers who are using no-till, the ones who say that they're doing it profitably, are telling you the truth. They're telling you the truth. They figured it out for their fields and for their systems. And that's something that we would like for you all to consider. There's another piece to all this too, though, and I think we'll probably hear more of this from Mr. Ehler very soon, but there's the piece of maintaining our direct costs. We have to maintain direct costs in a reasonable range. Direct costs, of course, are all of our inputs, our seeds, our chemicals. It also includes drying costs and transportation. Those are our direct costs that we include in all of our economic summaries. And what we see is that by far, and regardless of which one of our tillage classes we're looking at, the soybean farmers that are the most profitable are maintaining their yields not at the very low end and not at the very high end, but in this moderate range. So a couple of lessons there from PCM. 3 or more pass systems are consistently less profitable. If you're tilling 3 or more times, our data set says, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about corn or soybean or low productivity soils or high productivity soils, our farmers are making less money when they're doing 3 or more tillage passes. So I think that is an important take-home message. Among the most profitable fields, no-till was the most prevalent tillage system. And it's important, though, to keep our direct costs in a moderate range. And finally, we really can't fully sacrifice yields. Maintaining higher yields is important to maintaining the highest profitability. I think we'll learn more about that soon, too. So back to this, we've just talked about how we can reduce our nitrate losses with reducing tillage and what that might mean for our financial bottom line. Let's talk about how we can reduce our nitrate losses from our soybean fields with cover crops. Why do they work? I don't even think I need to show you this, but growing roots out there throughout the year or through more of the year is only beneficial. It's beneficial for many different reasons. But in terms of nitrate losses, it takes up the nitrogen, it prevents losses through leaching, and it retains the nitrogen in the field, retaining your investment in the fertilizer. Nobody at this point in time can just throw away nitrogen fertilizer. So very important. It also provides a high-quality residue for those microbes that are out there so that they don't have to resort to pulling out and immobilizing nitrogen fertilizer, so that they don't have to resort to breaking down our soil organic matter and mining our soils. And I just can't help myself, I have to remind you that they also do a fantastic job of reducing phosphorus losses. Phosphorus losses, in fact, turn out to be the biggest problem that we're seeing in our nutrient loss reduction strategy from a non-point ag sector source. This phosphorus loss from non-point sources is turning out to be the tough nut to crack, as it turns out. So they reduce phosphorus losses, they stop soil erosion, they increase biological diversity, they reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they build soil carbon. I'll stop now. But when cover crops are out in our fields, they're doing a tremendous service. And I do have some data on that, but first, I have a favor to ask. It's kind of a big one and it's kind of important. Is everybody listening? You know how sometimes we say something and it sounds really good for a couple of years, but then it's kind of like, you know, the song that keeps coming on the radio. After a while, you know, it's just played itself out and it just doesn't work anymore? Yeah. Can we please stop saying they're not the silver bullet, you know, about cover crops? I've heard farmers say it, plenty of them. And I've heard ag retailers say it, plenty of them too. I've heard folks from the Illinois Department of Ag say it, and I've heard folks from the Illinois EPA say it, and I've heard folks from NRCS say it, and I've heard folks from the Illinois Soybean Association say it, and I've heard folks from the Illinois Corn Growers say it. I might have said it myself, and if I did, I'd like to publicly apologize. There was a time when it was cool to say, all right? There was a time. You know what? That time is over. And let me give you a couple of reasons why. When we say it now, at this point in time, when we know the gravity of the situation with nitrate losses, we know that we haven't made much improvement in water quality for nitrogen or phosphorus, when we know that farmers are out there trying cover crops at a lot of extra labor and expense and they're working through it on their own farms, when we say something like this as farmers because we don't want to talk about cover crops anymore, we're shooting those guys in the foot. The ones who are out there working on it, the ones who are trying. It's just disrespectful to them. Let's quit saying it. Let's quit saying it just because of that one reason I think is good enough. But there's other reasons. It's really a manipulation by some people when it's used. It's not a silver bullet, you know. What they're trying to do, it's a tactic to turn the conversation somewhere else. They know cover crops are a solution. They don't want to talk about cover crops, okay? They want to talk about nitrogen inhibitors, all right? So they're like, yeah, cover crops, they're not a silver bullet. And then they just move on to whatever it is they actually want to talk to you about. There's better ways to do that. We often use it as farmers as a get-out-of-jail-free card because we think that'll just shut up whoever it is that's trying to shame us into using cover crops. I've got better solutions for that one coming right up. You're going to be excited. And then lastly, anybody with half a brain knows this, okay? It's not new knowledge. Nobody has ever heard cover crops, they're not the silver bullet, and they've thought to themselves, crap, is that right? I'm going to Google that when I get home. So for those of you who really just want to say, I don't want to grow a cover crop, I've got better ways. Good, reasonable sounding ways. Here's the first one. Well, cover crops cost money, and I really just can't justify growing them on my rented ground right now without some financial help. What, you're a business person? This is your family's income? Well, shut my mouth. Okay, Maybe they'll even say something like, well, how much do cover crops actually cost you? And what would it cost to get you to change your mind and grow a cover crop? Holy cow, teachable moment handed to you on a silver platter. Seize it, talk to them. Actually, cover crops cost anywhere from like $20 to $50, maybe even more. And they're just added a lot of risk to our operation. And teachable moment. Tell these people who don't understand. They don't have ill intentions. They just don't understand what it requires of you to grow a cover crop and what it costs. Same here. Cover crops, they require labor during a time when I simply don't have the spare time or the spare help to manage them. Well, is that right? How much extra time and labor does it cost you? There you have it. Talk to them. Another good one. It could complicate my relationship with my landowners. Your landowners don't want you to grow a cover crop? Are you kidding? Why in the world not? Huh. Well, tell me about that. Teachable moments. These are great ways to explain to people that cover crops are complicated. This one's not quite as good, but if, you got to use it, you got to use it. If nothing of the above is true, you can just say, well, I just don't want to do something new. I mean, that makes you sound really old and kind of crotchety, but hey, if it's true, and you can say it, and at least it's not shooting anybody else in the foot who's doing some good work. Speaking of things that are not new, cover crops, most of you know this, cover crops are not new. They've been around for a very long time. Many of you probably know your dad or your parents, your grandparents even, used cover crops on their farm, probably though for reasons different than what we're talking about today for capturing nitrogen losses and phosphorus losses. Here is a researcher. He bounced around the country a little bit. He was a well-known researcher. His name was Henry Armsby. He was really sort of a chemist, and he did a lot in animal agriculture as well. But in 1888, he published a paper in the journal Science, and this is what he wrote about what today we call cover crops. Keep growing roots present in the soil as long and as extensively as possible to seize upon the nitrogen and other elements as well, which will otherwise be washed out of the soil, and store it up in soluble forms ready for the needs of future crops. Amazing. They knew this. They knew this in 1884, folks. This is not new knowledge either. So I think that we ask ourselves, does it still work today? Does this still work today? Friends, when cover crops work, nothing works better. And now I have some data to show to you. So this is some Nutrient Research and Education Council funded data. This is some work done by researchers at the University of Illinois with some really fantastic help from Illinois Fertilizer and Chem Association folks and other farm research help. This has been an ongoing study at the Douglas County Research Site for how many years, Dan? 7, 8? What the researchers here are demonstrating really is the importance of nitrogen timing in terms of reducing nitrate nitrogen losses out of tile lines. So what we see here is, my pointer doesn't point that great, but on the vertical axis, this is the nitrate concentration coming out of the tiles. And then here we see on the horizontal axis just the date, different things that happened at different dates. We see it for soybean and corn, and then for an alternative field that was just in the alternative rotation, corn versus soybean. The red and the black lines there are showing what happens when the nitrogen is applied either all in the fall or half in the fall. That's the red and the black lines there. But isn't it interesting to see that during the soybean year, if you drew a trend line through that here, and then if you drew a trend line, if you took out the red and the black there, and you drew another trend line through the corn, boy, corn and soybeans are losing very similar amounts of nitrate nitrogen in terms of the concentration coming out of the tiles. But they had one treatment, one very special treatment, that was not just nitrogen timing, it was nitrogen timing plus a cover crop, and that is this blue line here. And so in front of corn, they grew oats and radish, and you can see that is still the lowest nitrate concentrations coming out of the tile lines. But what happens when they planted cereal rye ahead of their soybean? 40% reduction in the nitrate load coming out of those tiles. You have just almost met the nitrogen goal of the nutrient loss reduction strategy for this particular field with a cover crop. How much does it take? How much cover crop does it take to statistically reduce our nitrate levels to this amount? Right here you see it. About half a ton of biomass per acre is what we would like to see, is what those researchers determined would create a statistically significant reduction in nitrate nitrogen losses. That's about 6 to 8 inches tall. They also did it at another site in a strip-tilled field ahead of corn growing winter barley. And so, of course, they let it maybe grow a little bit taller here in between the rows because they took out about 10 inches for the strips there, and still this created a statistically significant nitrate reduction from those tile lines. So it's not just about the seeds per acre, it's also, of course, about the growth stage at which you kill it, and you don't have to let it get waist high to get a really great nitrogen or phosphorus loss reduction there. Oh my, but now we get to financials of cover crops. And here all the happiness ends, I'm afraid. This is coming from PCM data. I have to tell you, most of these fields that are being represented here, and you can see the numbers of them down here for soybean, 372 overwintering cover crop fields ahead of soybean, and only 21 winter terminal fields ahead of soybean versus, 2,500 no cover crop fields. This is just pulling this straight out of our PCM database over this 5 years of data. Same thing we show here for corn. Most of these fields, I will tell you, were being cover cropped for the first time because these were in a cost share program, and the folks who were paying for it wanted first-time cover crop fields. So not only are these often demonstrating the financial issues that we're seeing with cover crops in new fields that are new to cover crops, fields that haven't really acclimated to the cover crop system yet. Sometimes these were farmers who were brand new to it, and they are really refining their system as well. But it has to be said, they did reduce our yields somewhat. This was less obvious for soybean in no-till fields. There was almost no reduction in yields. But it's really our costs. Again, it's our costs that are killing us for soybeans. And we just can't pretend that these returns are the same, even though we do expect, and we know that there are farmers who say that they are managing cover crops in a way that is far more cost-effective, and on their own acres they see so much benefit from it from so many different perspectives that they do feel like they are financially benefiting from cover crops as well. And so I'd like to tie this up with some cover crop summaries from everything that we've seen here. Cover crops are the key to reducing nutrient losses and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We will continue to be asked to do them. When they work, nothing works better. They're a very visible solution to almost all of our environmental problems. They do, however, have greater risk of financial loss than other conservation practices that we can implement. They're more effective, and yet they have greater risk of loss. We do find that experience in managing the costs is the key to doing it more profitably, growing cover crops. And finally, we know that there is going to be a role for ecosystem service markets and new policy innovations, like new crop insurance mechanisms that are going to offer farmers opportunity to benefit from cover crops in the future. And that really does conclude everything that I wanted to share with you today, and I thank you so much for your time. And the last thing that I would like to bring this back to is this new generation of consumers. And one thing that we know is, if you'll recall back in the, about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the entire country started moving in a new trajectory in education, and we said we have to start doing better with our STEM disciplines. Do you all remember when we said, the United States is doing poorer in science, technology, engineering, and math than any other developed country in the world? Do you remember when that was happening? And we said we have to start doing better with the STEM disciplines. And folks, we did. And these young people are a product of that. And they speak in terms of science and technology. And yes, they're concerned about the science of climate change. They're open to the science and the shifting science that we see in climate change as well. But they also feel comfortable, and they feel confident in technologies like CRISPR, breeding technology, and new kinds of genetic modification technologies, which is, I think, a wonderful departure from folks in my generation. So I think that would give us some hope. But they are demanding from us greater transparency. They want to see our sustainability. And I think we would serve ourselves well if we can provide that on our own terms in a voluntary way. And I think it's time for us to come together. And first and foremost, do no harm. Please don't speak ill of people using good practices. Please don't speak ill of the conservation programs that are out there. Please just try to support the work where you see that you can and be a leader in conservation, because it's going to become more and more important. And if we can find one way that we can all work together to define big A agriculture's sustainability, work towards it on our own farms, in our own time, in our own way, and then we get to claim our own victories. And that's what I'd like to leave you with today.